You can change Congress. You can change Congress. Volunteer blue, volunteer blue. Make the whole thing move. You can change Congress. You can change Congress. One more voice, one more you. Volunteer blue.
I am so excited to be here with you all tonight. My name is Morgan Starr, and I'm a volunteer with Volunteer Blue and an organizer in my community. On behalf of Volunteer Blue and our many partner organizations, I would like to welcome you. We are so delighted that you could join us today for our tiny Zoom session and be here to discuss everything that is going on in our world and have a discussion with Congressman Jamie Raskin on the state of our union and what we can do to save it. So before we get into our speaker session today, I just want to provide you a little preview of what we will be talking about. We will hear from Congressman Raskin, which I'm really excited about, and I hope you all are too. And then we will also discuss the various ways that you can get involved, whether that be your first time getting involved or maybe your 100th event that you are doing. There are so many opportunities out there, and that is what Volunteer Blue is all about. We are an organization that connects volunteers with 40 plus grassroots groups all across the country. All of these groups are working to flip Congress in 2026. So if you're looking to phone bank, canvass, text bank, send postcards, have a house meeting, we have an event for you. And we also have a place to go if you don't know where to start. So we're just going to share a slide right now that has some of our different opportunities. If we could put that up, and we'll walk through them briefly. And then we will also walk through that a bit later too as well. And as we're getting that pulled up, I will just share the first link in the chat, which is where can you take the first step? So maybe like many of you, or when I was volunteering for the first time, I had no idea where to get involved and what to do first. Someone approached me on my college campus and asked me to go to Virginia to knock some doors. And I said, okay, because they told me there'd be some free lunch. And I was like, sounds like a fun opportunity and I could go to a new state. So that was my first step to getting involved. But there are so many different ways to get involved. So we really recommend heading to volunteerblue.org to get started. On our website, there is an opportunity to view a full calendar of events, or you can just sign up for our email list as kind of a first place. Then you can pick an activity, and as you see here in red, there are so many different activities that you can start with. And so we have things ranging from canvassing to phoning, which we have here, which is phone banking. This is something you can do from home, even in your pajamas if you want to, or you can have your friends over and make a night of it. We also have a bunch of different events on there. The second thing that I wanted to share is that you can get personal coaching. And so what this means is you can meet with one of our action coaches, and this person will help you find the right activity for your schedule and your interests. And so when you sign up with this action coach, you'll get a Zoom invitation and you can meet on Zoom. It's about 20 minutes and you'll meet with them, tell them what you're interested in. This is a real person, not a chatbot or anything like that. And they'll sort of explain everything that's available and what you can do to get started. And as you can see, we have a ton of spots open for next week. So I encourage you to sign up with an action coach and make sure that you can take that first step in getting involved today. And if you've been doing it for a while and maybe want to change it up and find a new opportunity, that's all good too. You can still meet with an action coach there. The next opportunity we have is recruiting volunteers in key districts to flip Congress, as well as a red project action, which is also about flipping districts in our Congress. And so we will go through those events in more detail after our session with Congressman Raskin, but I believe we are ready to sort of dive into the main portion of our session today with Congressman Raskin. And so before we introduce the Congressman, I just wanted to share a little bit about Congressman Raskin's background, which I feel really needs no introduction, but I will briefly share that Congressman Jamie Raskin is serving in the 5th In his fifth term representing Maryland's 8th District in the U.S. House, he's the ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee and co-chair of the Rapid Response Task Force and Litigation Working Group of the House Democratic Caucus. Rep. Raskin was the lead impeachment manager in the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump for inciting insurrection against the Union and served on the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Prior to Congress, Raskin was a 3-term state senator in Maryland and a professor of constitutional law at American University, my alma mater. So we're really excited to be with you today. And he has also authored several books, including the New York Times bestseller, Unthinkable: Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy. It's an honor to be with you, Congressman Raskin. I will turn the floor to you.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be with everybody. Thank you for volunteering Blue, everybody. That is so awesome. You know that is going to be what it takes to get us through this nightmare. We are in the fight of our lives. And we have a majority of the country on our side, big time. But we are up against every trick in the book: voter suppression, disenfranchisement, propaganda, disinformation, fake news, you name it. And yet we are enormously resilient, and we are battle hardened, and we are battle ready for the times to come. And, I just want to remind everybody that the right to vote has always been contested in America. In fact, nothing is more emblematic of the American philosophy than everybody's got the right to vote. And nothing has been more emblematic of American history than recurrent efforts to strip people of the right to vote, disenfranchise people, pass voter suppression mechanism. So we got to go out, we got to mobilize everybody to vote. We got to galvanize and organize people to vote, keep our eyes on the prize of winning back the House and the Senate, winning back the Congress. And then we got to defend the election with everything that we've got. So that's what we need to do. And then we're going to have to restore what James Madison called the preeminence of the Congress of the United States. Sometimes my colleagues will get up on the floor and they will repeat that 6th grade talking point or dogma about 3 co-equal branches. First of all, co-equal is not even a word. Okay, that's kind of like very unique or something like that. And they can't decide whether or not to hyphenate it or not. But look, the bottom line is the reason Madison said that Congress is the leading branch is because we had a revolution against a king. We wanted to make certain that the representatives of the people would make the most important decisions, like whether or not to go to war, which is why exclusively Congress has the power to declare war, not Donald Trump or J.D. Vance or Tulsi Gabbard or their Signal chat group. It's not up to them. It's not up to Donald Trump and Mohammed bin Salman and Benjamin Netanyahu whether we're going to war against Iran. It's up to the representatives of the people in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. It's up to us. It's not up to Donald Trump to decide whether or not to impose the largest tax in American history on businesses and consumers with his tariff, which is why even his gerrymandered and stacked and packed Supreme Court had to strike him down. It's not up to him to decide how to spend the money of the people. It's up to us. That it is Congress which has the power to spend, the power of the purse. So if we say you spend money on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or you spend money on AID and campaigns against malaria and HIV, AIDS, and against hunger around the world, well, then you spend that money. You don't divert it. You don't impound it. You don't rechannel it. None of that. You must follow what Congress has said. What is the role of the president? Congress has all these powers under Article 1. What's the role of the president? The core job of the president is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. That's it. Not thwarted, not rejected, not revised, not rewritten. We've got no kings here. That's the president's job. And by the way, if we're co-equal, why does Article 2 say that that we can impeach the president for high crimes and misdemeanors like treason and bribery, right? We've got the power to impeach, try, convict, remove, and disqualify for life the president, and he doesn't have the power to impeach, try, convict, remove, and disqualify us. Okay, and it is, of course, the role of the judiciary in Article 3 of the Constitution to, as you know, Chief Justice Marshall said in Marbury versus Madison, it's emphatically the province of the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. To say what the law is. Okay, so we need to advance the voting rights of the people, especially in the wake of this nightmarish decision, the Calais decision, where the Supreme Court just wiped out the remainder of the Voting Rights Act in 2013 in Shelby County versus Holder. The court destroyed the pre-clearance mechanism, the central function which said that covered jurisdictions, those that had engaged in discrimination in the past, had to submit any changes to voting plans to the Department of Justice or to the district court in the District of Columbia. Now, in the Calais decision, they also wiped out Section 2, which said we're going to use an effects test, not an intent test. You don't have to perform heart surgery on the legislatures if the effect of their law closing down polling places or throwing people off the rolls is to discriminate. That's sufficient for a Voting Rights Act violation. And the Supreme Court completely rewrote what Congress had passed in 1982 in the amendments to the Voting Rights Act. So we've got our hands full in trying to deal with that. We've got the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but we know that this Supreme Court loves nothing more than to dismantle our efforts to defend the Voting Rights Act against all of their hostile overtures. We know what the Supreme Court and the Trump administration and MAGA are aiming for, essentially all Republican districts from Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, you name it, all of the southern states. And that, you know, it was Trump's determination to launch this Texas chainsaw gerrymander massacre to just get him 5 seats, which kicked off this redistricting war that we are in now across the country. When we get the gavels back, we are going to have to try to abolish partisan gerrymandering in the country. And I think we're going to have to move to multi-member districts with ranked choice voting as a way for Republicans to be able to get elected in California and Michigan and New York sometimes, and Democrats to get elected also in Arkansas and Alabama and Mississippi and South Carolina. But otherwise, we're moving to complete partisan polarization of Congress. That's where the Roberts Court is driving us today. So we need to be heading up democracy reform in the country. One thing I agree with President Trump about is statehood, but not for Canada, not for Greenland, not for Panama, which have not asked for statehood and which are part of other countries. Statehood for Washington, D.C., the only national capital on planet Earth where the residents are disenfranchised in their parliament. And, you know, when we passed it on the House side in 2020 and 2022, and I got to be the floor leader with Eleanor Holmes Norton, the DC delegate, and I got up and I said, you know what? I want to start by thanking 713,000 tax-paying draftable U.S. citizens in the District of Columbia who have a bona fide grievance against Congress and yet didn't come down here and beat the daylights out of our police officers and put them in the hospital and give them heart attacks and strokes. The people of D.C. have done it the right way. They petitioned for statehood, and we should admit them the way we admitted the last 37 states. And we should admit 3.5 million Americans in Puerto Rico, which another disenfranchised population, which can't even vote for president of the United States. So, in any event, John Dewey, used to say that the only solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy, and that's what we need to be fighting for, more democracy, because what we're suffering from today is not democracy, but all of the impediments and all of the obstacles to it. And we have got to organize massive landslide conditions, a landslide so large that they can't even begin to try to steal it. And then we need to defend the election all the way through the election. And then we need to vindicate the powers of Congress to get the country moving again. So those are my thoughts for you on this Tuesday night. And I want to thank you all for everything you're doing. And I get to be here I can be here until 7:40 if you need me or you want me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Representative Raskin. We are actually going to have some questions for you if you are open to that. Before we do that, though, like you mentioned, we have our hands full with so much work that needs to be done in this upcoming year. And so I wanted to share with everyone some of the different opportunities to get involved with Volunteer Blue and the many partner organizations we work with. And as all good organizers do, we want to ask each of you to sign up for a phone bank, a training, or one of those action sessions with one of our coaches. And so we are going to play a song while you sign up, and we will be dropping links in the chat. Just one note that the links on the screen are not live, so you will want to go to the chat to actually click on those. One thing we are launching is a new concentrated effort to mobilize in red districts. This is for out-of-state volunteers who can call and text friendly in-state Democrats to urge them to become volunteers in their own district. These local volunteers will in turn work to boost Democratic turnout in the midterms, and this is the most important action remote volunteers can take for the November elections. And we've been, talking to some folks who've already been doing this work, and they are finding it really fulfilling and enjoyable. And so we want to make sure we're dropping that link in the chat for you, which will be in Arizona coming up, and there's a lot of other opportunities as well. As we mentioned earlier, we also have the personal coaching and just a way to take that first step, that first link here on the screen where you can get involved with Volunteer Blue, look through our calendar and see what opportunities are coming up that might fit you best. Another thing I wanted to mention is we will be doing another tiny Zoom on July 22nd. With Bill McKibben. And so just wanted to make sure you all have the information for that. All righty. It's great to see more people getting involved. All right, so we want to jump right into Q&A. I know we have a lot of questions, and thank you all for your patience. It's so important that we discuss the questions, but also do all the work and the organizing work that needs to get done. So Representative Raskin, one question we had for you is, what happens when Democrats take back the House? What would be different, and what would the likelihood of impeachment be if we were to take the House?
Okay, well, first of all, remember, the Republicans will still be controlling the White House. Trump is still going to be in for 2 years, at least theoretically. They still control the Supreme Court. But I think two critical things are going to happen. One is that we are going to control the gavels for the purposes of investigating, uncovering, and opposing all of the corruption that now saturates the U.S. government, from the receipt of a $400 million unconstitutional jet from Qatar to taking us to war unconstitutionally, to the conversion of the presidency into a for-profit enterprise and a get-rich-quick scheme where this president has earned more than $2 billion, which is more than 10 times more than every member of Congress makes together, and is, hundreds of times more than all the presidents in the past have made. We've moved into a completely different kind of government. So number one, we have to confront the corruption, which we are drenched in, and which is completely thwarting the purposes of government in a democratic society. But secondly, we've got to begin to lay out the legislative program that we are going to enact once we get the government back. We have been doing everything we can to zealously defend, for example, the healthcare rights of the people. But it is time for us to move forward for a national healthcare plan that is going to vindicate everybody's right to healthcare. So it's not a privilege, but it's a basic right of the people in the country. And we have 100 different things like that. We've got to reclaim public lands for the public and try to save our environment from them just surrendering, giving away public lands to the largest corporations for purposes of mining and exploitation. We got to get back on the track in terms of climate change and so on. So we have a positive policy agenda. We have an investigative anti-corruption agenda. Now, will it lead to other kinds of reforms or other kinds of actions. Let's take impeachment, which some people are asking about. We are not afraid of impeachment. Nobody can ever accuse me of being afraid of impeachment. I led an impeachment drive against Donald Trump for fomenting and inciting a violent insurrection against the Union, the storming of the Capitol to surround the inside political coup, which they had planned in order to upend the Electoral College and to try to torture an ill-gotten victory out of certain defeat that Trump had. Okay, so is there treason? Is there bribery? Are there other high crimes and misdemeanors? We are keeping a very careful record of everything that is going on, and we are going to be prepared as we were with Pam Bondi, where there was a movement to impeach her. Then she came to the Judiciary Committee, and when the Judiciary Democrats got through it, she was out of there within 24 hours. The same thing with Kristi Noem, who came to the Judiciary Committee. So we are doing our homework, we are rolling up our sleeves, and we are demanding accountability for all of these officials. And that's true for Donald Trump, too. Impeachment is not a taboo with anybody on the Democratic side, but we also don't see it as a panacea. Obviously, you need a majority vote in the House to impeach, and then you need 2/3 in the Senate in order to convict. It's also, an enormously time-consuming and energy-draining process. So I've thought a lot about this, and I've written about this. Impeachment was considered to be a judicial thing, and the framers said, no, it should belong with the people's representatives. That means that we've got to consider impeachment in the full context of our entire policy agenda, because we are the same people who are trying to bring healthcare to everybody, who are trying to stabilize and expand Social Security for the people. We're the ones doing all of that at the same time that we have to reckon with high crimes and misdemeanors, which oftentimes are a civic emergency. So all of which is to say, it's not a taboo. It's not a fetish for us. We don't see it as a panacea, but it's very much a tool in our toolbox, and we will use it if we have to.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about the Supreme Court and what are possibly the reforms that can be done there, or what can be done about the Supreme Court.
Well, I've already introduced some legislation which you can check out to try essentially to overthrow the scandal of the shadow docket, compelling them to actually spell out their rationale for decisions. If you don't give an analysis of why, if you take, an excellent magisterial, authoritative 120-page opinion from an appeals court or a district court, and you overturn it in one sentence or one paragraph in your shadow docket, that's not law anymore. That is judicial whimsy and judicial fancy, mimicking the monarchical pretensions of the president who you're defending. And that's basically where we are. I put in another one to move to a different kind of system for granting cert, because this court, they will decide, this term we're going to overturn Roe versus Wade, and next term we're going to, turn the corporation into a rights-bearing political citizen of the country, and the next one we're going to create out of thin air a new presidential immunity from felony prosecutions for crimes committed under the auspices of his office. They set an agenda like they're a legislative body. So no, my CERT Act says that there will be a new cert-granting judicial committee made up of the chief judge of each federal circuit. We have 13 federal circuits. They will decide, because most of the cases that go to the court, and there are not many of them, but most of them are circuit splits. So they're aware of the differences in circuit law, but they also, I hope, would act with somewhat more objectivity and dispassion and less political fervor in deciding what cases go up to the Supreme Court. People want to know, I understand, are we going to enlarge the Supreme Court in order to countermand the outrageous packing and stacking of the Supreme Court by the Republicans? Remember, when Justice Scalia died in February of 2020, and President Obama nominated my constituent, Merrick Garland, to the Supreme Court, Mitch McConnell said, I'm not going to give you a hearing. I'm not going to give you a voting committee. I'm not going to give you a vote on the floor. It's 11 months before the election. 11 months is too close to the next election. We're going to let the people decide. Of course, the people had decided by electing Barack Obama to one of those genuine 4-year terms in office, but they blockaded him. So they stole one seat right there. That ended up going to Justice Gorsuch. But then when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, less than 2 months before the end of Trump's term in office, early voting had already started in some states. Then the reporters that day said to Mitch McConnell, well, of course, you're not going to go forward with less than 2 months to go. And you said 11 months was too close. He laughed it off and he said, oh, that's a joke. I mean, we just did that for the Democrats. And then they barreled through Amy Coney Barrett's nomination. She was confirmed, I think it was 6 days before the presidential election took place. So, right, that's 2 seats right there. So there's absolute illegitimacy to this court without even getting into the profound ethics crisis of the court, where each of these justices has their own billionaire sugar daddy flying them all over the world and giving them, cruises and stuff like that. In Justice Thomas's case, private school tuition for his great nephew. I mean, it's incredible what the MAGA justices have done in the court. But in any event, so let me just give you a theory about a way to think about the times we're moving into. And obviously, we're not going to jump to anything like that. We've got to start with a gift ban on the court. We got to start with an ethics code because we don't have one. Maybe we need an ethics court for the Supreme Court, because right now, if you think someone has a blatant conflict of interest, like Justice Alito or Justice Thomas, and you report it to the court, guess who gets to decide whether or not there's a conflict? Alito and Thomas get to decide in their own case, right? So let me just lay out one possibility that we've been talking about. There are 13 federal circuits in America. There are only 9 justices, which means that 4 circuits are left out of the Supreme Court. And under the best of circumstances, if all the other ones are represented. Actually, it turns out today that there are 5 justices basically from the New York City metropolitan area. We've got 1 justice for each borough in New York City. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to have entire regions of the country that are left out of the Supreme Court. And it used to be there was 1 justice for each federal circuit. And that's what circuit riding was all about. They would participate in adjudication on federal law, constitutional matters, but they would go back to their circuit and they would work with the circuits on both administrative and legal stuff. Well, again, that can't happen if we have only 9 justices instead of 13. So one possibility is we move to term limits for the Supreme Court. Overwhelmingly popular, more than 80% of the people favor that, which is extraordinary. We could go to 18-year terms. We move to 13 justices on the court. You make sure that each president can nominate 2 justices during the course of their term instead of relying just purely on the arbitrariness and the propinquity of who happens to decide to leave the court, which also makes them far more political. And we know that they're always, gerrymandering their own resignation and so on. And people say, well, can you do that because they're guaranteed life tenure? Yeah, as long as they have tenure in the judicial system, in the federal judicial system, so they could go to a federal district court or they could go to a federal appeals court. So that's one possibility that people are talking about. We don't have a bill in about that now, but the Republicans are trying to freeze their gerrymandered and stacked and packed in Supreme Court. They literally have introduced legislation for a constitutional amendment to freeze the court at 9 when we have changed the size of the Supreme Court 6 or 7 times. Why would we strip a power that the people have in Congress away from ourselves to freeze it, other than the fact they happen to like the justices that are in there now? And a majority of the justices in their 6-member MAGA block were put in by presidents who got a minority of the popular vote. That is Bush and Trump. Okay, so there's some seriously anti-democratic things going on there. I'm not even sure if I mentioned the Electoral College before, but hey, it's 2026. How about it's time we start electing the President of the United States the way we elect senators, representatives, governors, and mayors, and whoever gets the most votes wins. How about that? Instead of 5 of our presidents lost the popular vote twice in this century, in 2000 and 2016. That is massively, overwhelmingly popular. Got to move forward with the national popular vote interstate compact. And then once we do that once or twice, we will be able to pass a constitutional amendment. I know it. That's how we got women's suffrage. A lot of states acted first to do it. It's how we, got the 17th Amendment for direct election of U.S. senators. The states are saying we will form an interstate electoral college coalition once we have 270 electors in here, and we're 2/3 of the way there, more than 2/3 of the way there. And then once we get to 270, we will all cast our electors for the winner of the national popular vote. That was the very first bill I introduced when I was a state senator in Maryland, and Maryland became the first state to do it. And everybody said, oh, it's too complicated. Nobody will understand it. Nobody understands electoral college. In fact, we have a massive majority in America of patriotic Americans who love our country, who want to understand our Constitution if they don't. And as Jefferson said, the Electoral College is an ink blot on the Constitution. But everybody understands that is stuck in time. It is antiquated, it is obsolete, and it's time for us to move forward on that. Okay, next question. Sorry for filibustering there.
No, that's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. We have time probably for about 2 more questions here. And so folks are saying that we need a unified message. Do we think the Democratic Party can align on a common agenda and a message?
Well, yeah. And I think it comes from the contrast with the Republicans, right? Where we say the government must be an instrument for the common good of everyone. The government must be working to lower prices, lower the cost of healthcare. The government must be working to protect our air, our water, the effectiveness of our regulatory agencies, versus a vision which says, no, the government is an instrument for the private self-enrichment of the president and his family and his friends. In other words, is the government going to be an instrument of corruption, or is it going to be an instrument for the common good? And that's where I think we are. Roosevelt did not call our party the Democratic Party, much less the Democrat Party, which is what the MAGA Republicans call us. But he called us the democracy. And he would say, the plutocrats, the economic royalists say, just invest in the very wealthiest corporations in America and some of the wealth will dribble down on everybody else. The democracy says you invest in the great American working middle class, and we will all rise up together out of poverty and into prosperity. And that's the doctrine of the democracy. So we should call ourselves the democracy, because today that's what we are. It's the democracy versus the autocracy and the plutocracy and the theocracy and the kleptocracy. Every other distortion of democratic government is now embodied in MAGA. And we have to stand up for the real article. One person, one vote. Congress representing the people, legislating in the interest of the common good, and moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And what is one thing that all of us on the call can do to really make some of this a reality, especially as we head into the 2026 election?
Well, I mean, you guys are obviously an activated and engaged part of the democracy here. I don't know how many Navalny fans are out there. If you've read Navalny's book called Patriot, it's so beautiful. But he would say, he when he went back to Russia, even after Putin poisoned him, and he went back to organize the country, and then was thrown into prison, and he wrote in his book, Patriot, he said, people would ask me, well, what can I do other than, join your anti-corruption party? And he'd say, the one thing that everybody's got to do every day is go out and tell the truth about what's happening. Because the liars and the thieves and the hypocrites, he said, thrive on the lies, the propaganda and the disinformation. And we need to be the party of truth. And, democracy, my dad once said, needs a ground to stand on, and that ground is the truth. And I believe that, and that's why the authoritarians always go to war against the truth, always try to manipulate and control the media the way Donald Trump is trying to do.
Thank you so much for that. And what a great way to end our evening tonight. Thank you so much again for being here with us and sharing so much of your time and knowledge and advice. We are so grateful to have you as one of our fighters in the House and excited to work with you again in the future. Thank you so much, Representative Raskin.
I appreciate it. Like, can I leave you with the words of two of the great democracy heroes in my heart? One is Frederick Douglass, the great Marylander, who was born into slavery at the Wye River Plantation, who escaped from slavery to become our great freedom fighter through the Civil War and Reconstruction. And he said, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. And the struggle may be moral, it may be physical, it may be moral and physical, but there must be struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and never will. That's a message to you from Maryland. And I'll leave you finally with the words of the great Tom Paine, who got here in 1774, fell in love with the promise of America. He said, if this country lives up to its values and ideals, he said it will become an asylum to humanity. Not an insane asylum, mind you, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from political, intellectual, and religious repression all over the world. And he wrote the great pamphlet of our history, Common Sense, by which he meant the sense we have in common when we reason together and speak plainly to each other without propaganda and disinformation and fake news and all the dogma and everything. And George Washington was reading that by campfire light to the troops out at Valley Forge. But anyway, 1776 was a tough year. We like to think everybody was together against the king and the crown, and everybody wanted to disentangle church and state. But actually, half of the people were running around saying, you can't beat the greatest military empire that ever existed. We can't live without a king and a queen. Who will keep order if not a king and a queen? Half of the people were saying back, well, let's give it a try. Like, let's pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor to put government on a different principle, the principles that Jefferson embodied in the Declaration of everybody being created equal, of the unalienable rights of the people, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and democracy, the consent of the governed, government resting only on the consent. Anyway, Paine wrote this other pamphlet to give people hope during a very, very tough time, like the one we're in right now, knowing the country was split. And he wrote The American Crisis. He gave Common Sense, he wrote in January, and then in December, he wrote The Crisis. And I'm going to quote just a tiny little passage for you. Pelosi makes me update the language so it doesn't offend modern sensibilities. So anyway, he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country. But everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our triumph. Let's make that triumph ours in 2026. Thank you to all you fantastic Blue volunteers all over America. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you so much. I want to give you a huge round of applause. We are so grateful to be with you and so excited to continue this work. What an inspiring evening. Thank you all for being here. It's grateful. We're excited to be with you and excited to have you back in the future. We will keep you updated with all of the links in the chat and send out a recording of this event. And we will see you at the next one. Have a great night, everybody.
Out your door, knock, knock. One small step, big shock. Names on paper, boots on ground. Hear that spark go round and round. Say it once, say it right. Change can start tonight. You can change Congress.